Since you're the one watching over me tonight, with Dad working overtime at his robotics factory, you'll have to help me finish decorating the tree. But no, do you know why we decorate the trees at Christmas?
To make them look prettier.
Yes, of course, I know that. But how did we come to do this? To please Santa Claus?
Wait, I'm checking the internet. I found it. This comes from a tradition of the inhabitants of the Nordic countries. They were celebrating the time of the year when the length of the day just stopped decreasing and increased again. They celebrated it by hanging small candles on the trees. It brightened up the dark nights that started very early. Here, at 5 o'clock in the evening, it is already starting to get dark, but with them it could start as early as 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
Hey. Well, I wasn't that far out, because Santa Claus lives far in the north, right?
That's what they say. The time of year when the sun is lowest in the sky at noon is called the winter solstice and marks the start of the longer days.
Oh yeah? But then why does it keep getting colder and colder as the days get longer from then on?
This is because this terrestrial hemisphere, which has cooled down a lot, will take time to warm up again.
I see. But what does solstice mean?
It is a word that comes from the contraction of sol for sun and stice, which means station. For the winter solstice, it is the moment when the sun, which follows a very similar path for several days, stops descending and starts to ascend higher each day in the sky.
Days with a sun that remains very low with very long nights would be miserable.
In June, the sun follows a path that takes it higher and higher in the sky. The longest day is called the summer solstice. The consequence is that during this period it shines more and warms us more. And since it takes a longer time to go up and to come down, the duration of daylight is also longer, and therefore it warms the ground longer. At the equinoxes, days which correspond to the beginning of spring and autumn, the sun follows an average path and there is equality between the length of day and night. In winter, on the other hand, the path is much lower, shorter, and therefore it heats less for a longer time and less strongly, with the sun's rays spreading out more on the ground. Especially if you live further north. At the start of winter, you may not have any daylight at all. We can't even see the path of the sun anymore, and such an absence over several weeks must be awful to endure.
On the other hand, it's the opposite in the southern hemisphere, because while the North Pole is plunged into the night, the South Pole is always lit up.
Yes, all because the Earth's axis is tilted relative to the plane of its orbit around the sun.
Yes, it's like the globe we have in the classroom. And the star we put at the top of the Christmas tree, where does that come from?
The Catholic Church took a dim view of celebrating something unrelated to their religion, so they wanted to divert these festivities to associate them with the birth of Christ. The Bible indicates that a star guided the Magi from Babylon to Jerusalem in Palestine to celebrate the birth of the King of the Jews. It is a time of the year celebrated by Jews and Christians. But this also concerns Muslims, because Jesus is considered by them as a prophet. This is why Jerusalem is an important city for these three religions.
And the star that guided them, is it the pole star?
No, for two reasons. At first they weren't looking for the north but for a landmark signaling an unusual event in the sky. But the star we call Polaris is quite commonplace. At that time, there was no fixed bright star in the sky clearly indicating the direction of north.
Really? How come?
It has been known for a long time that the stars in the sky revolve around a fixed point and that this fixed point changes over the millennia. We now know that this movement is due to the axis of rotation of the Earth, which tilts in relation to the stars and returns to its position after a period of 26,000 years. This is called the precession of the equinoxes. 5,000 years ago, Thuban, the brightest star in the constellation of Draco, the dragon, played this role. And nowadays, it's all Rucaba, also known as Polaris. In 13,000 years, it will be the turn of Vega of the constellation Lyra. But most of the time, the axis points in a direction where there is not necessarily a bright star.
So what is this star that would have signaled them that something important was going to happen?
We don't really know.
And your internet knows that everything can't answer that simple question?
Well, no. Do you want us to go investigate?
Oh, yes!
For that, we are going to need an adequate means of transport.
What are you doing?
I'm trying to get what we're going to need for the trip. There it is.
Santa's sleigh? I can't believe it! You dared to hijack his only means of transport?
He won't need it for a few days anyway, and he won't say anything if we don't mess things up for him.
Wow! You can enter the destination and even modify the date.
Well, yes, without that, how do you think he would be able to distribute his presents in one night? With this dashboard he can stop the passage of time, and we are going to use it to go back in time.
Are we really allowed to use it?
Return destination. We are going to take a tour of the 16th century, to know what to look for and, above all, where and when.
Yahoo! What are we doing here?
Look there above the W drawn by the stars of the constellation Cassiopeia. Normally, there is no bright star there. It could be a star like that could guide the mages.
But it's 1,572 years too late.
That's true, but at that time, we imagined that this star could be a recurring nova, that is to say a star that periodically increases in brightness, because Leovitius recorded that in 945 and 1264 there was a brilliant phenomenon in the same region of the sky. It was expected to shine again 300 years later.
And is that what happened?
No, nothing at all. This idea was abandoned around 1880 because nothing had been seen to happen. It turns out that the star that shone in 1572 was actually what is called a supernova, the result of the explosion of a large star at the end of its life. In reality, the star had exploded 10,000 years ago, but it took all this time for its light to traverse space and reach us. This is how it appears in the photos taken today. A beautiful remnant of the fireworks that were seen in the sky at that time. And no remnants of a supernova that was reportedly visible in the time of the Magi have been found. It's still pretty rare to see one with the naked eye. In 1054 AD, humanity was able to see a star exploding in the direction of the constellation Taurus.
Still too late to be our star.
And another exploded in 185 AD near Alpha Centauri. But this phenomenon, too far south of the sky, was not seen from Palestine. Another remnant of a remarkable star explosion was visible in the constellation of Cygnus, the Swan, called the Veil Nebula. It is said to have exploded in prehistoric times.
Too early! And in year zero.
Nothing. No matter how we looked at the sky, such a recent supernova would not have already dispersed without a trace. In any case, such an event does not necessarily indicate a direction to follow because it remains at a fixed position in the sky. Finally, if you want to be interested in what's moving in the sky, you have to look at what they called wandering stars and hairy stars.
Vagabond stars?
Actually, that's one name the planets were given, as well as wandering stars, at that time. Besides, everything that shone in the sky was called stars, including and all the bright points that moved in front of the stars.
That's pretty logical.
Let's see if there are any planetary approximations for this period visible from the Babylonian region from where the Mages observed. Around the year -1, Jupiter, which is associated with Marduk, the star of kings for the Babylonians, passed 3 times near the star Regulus, which was called the King Star in the constellation of Leo, the lion, the king of animals. The show began in early September of the year -2 with Mercury and Venus close together, followed on September 13 by the first conjunction. Then on February 19 of the year -1 the second conjunction took place. Finally, on May 7 of the year -1, the third and final conjunction took place. These phenomena, called conjunctions, could be interpreted by the astrological mages of the time as a triple divine coronation.
Jupiter seems to move forward and then back in the sky, as though it doesn't know where it's going.
This motion that occurs for all planets is called the downgrade loop. It was interpreted in ancient times by what are called epicycles. It is Mars that makes the most blatant loops. To anticipate the motion of the planets, scientists at the time had built a model that made the planets rotate in circles attached to circles around the Earth.
Yes? But what does the Earth do in the center? It's the sun that should be put there.
Yes, you are right. But they had difficulty designing a moving Earth. Imagine you are sitting in this blue car and you decide to overtake this red car that is slowing down.
It would surprise me that the Ferrari gets overtaken by the 4x4.
Yes, finally, let's just say. If you look closely, you'll feel like Ferrari is moving backwards. Well, that's exactly what happens when the Earth takes a year to do its orbit around the Sun. Mars, which is further from the Sun, takes 2 years to orbit it. As we undertake, it feels like Mars is going backwards. Then the Earth continues its tighter course around the Sun. The movement of Mars regains its usual direction after going through a time when the planet seems motionless, said to be stationary, in the sky. Going back to our conjunctions, in October of the year -2, Jupiter had found itself close to Venus, thought to be the mother star. This could have marked the announcement of the moment when the Virgin Mary found herself pregnant. Then Jupiter became stationary on December 25 in the direction of the south, seen from Jerusalem at nightfall. And Bethlehem is to the south of this city, where the mages could have stayed looking for where to go next.
It's okay, although it's a little hard to believe, but it's a bit early. Have there not been conjunctions closer to the year 0?
Actually, there is no year 0 because the concept of zero originates from Aryabhatta, a mathematician and astronomer living in India in the 5th century CE. It is most often defined that before year 1 we have year -1.
What?
On the other hand, Christ would have been born in the time of Herod, whose death took place shortly after the March 13 lunar eclipse at 1:45 a.m. in year -4.
What precision! But what is a lunar eclipse?
A lunar eclipse occurs when the Sun, Earth, and Moon line up in space. At that precise moment, the Earth obstructs the sunlight, which no longer manages to illuminate our natural satellite, the Moon. Eclipses are not that frequent a phenomena, and thanks to computers we can find the moments when these phenomena referred to in the writings took place.
It's beautiful, an eclipse of the Moon. But why does it appear red like that?
If we were on the Moon at that precise moment, we would see some sunlight passing through our atmosphere to illuminate the lunar surface with a faint reddish glow of the setting sun in a ring around the Earth. To come back to our point, we should therefore not look in year -1 but maybe even before. At that time, it was known that the seasons returned after a duration of 365 days or so. To do the maths, this number is complicated because it is only divisible by 5 and 73, both prime numbers. We much preferred 360, divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, which are the first numbers, which allows a whole series of splits into integers. Besides, since we saw the Moon in the sky looking the same every 30 days or so, and 12 times 30-day months is 360, it was much more convenient to count that way. They had decided that after 360 days, which corresponds to December 25 in our calendar, we should add 5 days of celebration before celebrating the new year. It should be noted that the celebration of the birth of Christ on December 25 only dates from the 4th century AD.
For them, it was the start of the Christmas holidays, before the New Year and after December 21st.
Observations from the sky were used a lot at that time to establish calendars and also to try to unravel its secrets. The return of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky in the early morning, served as a landmark. Look, it is easily found in the sky not far from the three aligned stars of the same brightness and the same spacing that we find in the winter sky. They are called the three kings of the constellation Orion.
The three wise men?
It was probably also a ploy to try to erase the old pagan beliefs of yesteryear. In 1614 AD, Johannes Kepler was interested in what had happened in the heavens at the time of Christ's birth. For this, he used the position measurements made by Tycho Brahe to refine the positions of the planets in ancient times. He deduced that the movement of the planets was done not on a circle but on an ellipse, a slightly flattened circle of which the Sun occupies one of the centers. He deduced that the speeds of the stars in the solar system depended on their proximity to the Sun.
Yes, they speed up when they are closer to the Sun and slow down when they're further away. And looking around the time that interests us, what did he find out about the positions?
Venus, also called the shepherd star because it can be seen in the evening, or in the morning, as the sheep enter and leave the sheepfold. This was in the constellation of Aries, which defined Judea at this time. In the morning in the east in April of the year 6 BCE. With in addition Jupiter and Saturn not far from there, these three stars drew a kind of shining arrow in the sky.
It holds together, but it's still common for there to be conjunctions in the sky. So why this one more than another?
And on December 19th, 6 BCE, Jupiter was due south by nightfall.
We've talked about it before, and it happens every year or so.
Certainly. Otherwise, there was a planetary gathering from May to November of the year -7. Jupiter and Saturn in Pisces with Mars joining them and all three pointing in the direction of Bethlehem from Babylon.
Interesting too, but still.
Saturn was the predominant planet of the Jews, besides Saturday meaning the Sabbath is related to Saturn.
Yeah, I know. Monday is associated with the moon, Tuesday to Mars, Wednesday to Mercury, Thursday to Jupiter, Friday to Venus, and Saturday to Saturn.
Very good. It is written in the Gospels that the sight of the star fills them with great joy.
It's true that it's pretty to see in the sky, but it's still far-fetched. Besides, earlier you mentioned hairy stars. What are these hairy stars?
That's the name comets were given back then. We're going to go see a beautiful one.
It's true that you can imagine that it looks like hair, and this one seems to form an arrow to mark a direction to follow. And what exactly is a comet?
Comets are bodies made of an agglomerate of rocks and icy blocks containing water that come from the far reaches of the solar system.
Yes! I was told it was like some kind of dirty snowball.
They are only active and diffuse sunlight well when they are closer to the Sun than the orbit of Jupiter. They then dégage over sometimes several million kilometers. They do not go unnoticed despite the small size of their core of only a few kilometers. Some have elliptical trajectories like the planets, so they pass and repass regularly near the Sun.
The most famous of all is Halley's Comet, right?
Yes.
And I also learned that comets were named after their discoverer.
This is also true, except for Halley's Comet, which is one of the exceptions to the rule. It is famous because it is the one that allowed Edmund Halley to understand that the beautiful comets of 1531, 1607 and 1682 could be a single object orbiting the Sun. He predicted by calculations in 1705 AD that it would come back in 1758. He died before his return, but scientists at the time named it in his honor.
That comet comes back to us every 76 years. Did it appear in the time that interests us?
It had passed in the sky in -10 and in +66.
So that doesn't quite match what we're looking for.
On the other hand, there is another periodic comet, Comet Encke, which passed close to Earth in November of the year -1. The star is described as a star that walked before the Magi. Comet Encke was shifting 6 degrees per day as it headed east, the direction of Palestine for astrologers from Babylon.
She fits pretty well.
Yes, except that Comet Encke is not a very bright comet, even if at that time, it must have been more active than now, because in the meantime it has certainly lost a lot of matter with each of its passages near the Sun.
And aren't there any others?
The people most likely to have noted everything that was passing in the sky at that time are Chinese astronomers. There is something that held their attention for 70 days in the spring of the year 5 BC near the star Alpha Capricorni. They described it as a comet, but it is more likely to be a nova, a star that suddenly becomes brighter in the sky. The season spring is not contradictory because the writings evoke the presence of sheep and shepherds at the time of the birth of Christ, and they are present on the pastures only in spring and summer. But Capricorn is only visible in the second half of the night at this time of year and in the direction of the southeast, which is not very convincing. In the register of stars and spectacular phenomena that could have caught the attention of the Magi, there is also that of shooting stars. Moreover, these phenomena are linked to the passage of comets. By passing and repassing regularly, a comet will leave a large amount of dust in its orbit. It suffices for its orbit to cross that of the Earth, so that each year, when the Earth returns to the same place, it receives a lot of this dust. As they pass through the Earth's atmosphere, they will cause these brilliant shooting star phenomenon. The association of the birth of Christ with the presence of a meteorite swarm had been suggested by Gregorius Nicephorus in the 14th century. At this time of year, there is indeed the Ursid shooting star swarm, linked to the constellation Ursa Major.
I know how to find the figure of the Big Dipper in the sky, with, in particular, the 7 brightest stars, which seem to draw the shape of a chariot.
Exactly. But to come back to this phenomenon, it repeats itself every year, never produces meteor showers to be the harbinger of something exceptional. Then you have to know that these shooting stars are radiating from the northeast direction, which is the opposite of the intended direction.
The child has just been born, and I still don't see anything shiny that could attract mages.
Yes, I don't understand. Too bad, it's time to go home now.
And return the sleigh to Santa Claus. I don't want to be deprived of gifts.